Scripto is highly optimized for a type of production which would be considered like live studio TV production. If you think about The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, where it was originated, or Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, or Weekend Update on SNL, those are the types of shows that Scripto powers today.
Hi, and welcome to the Creative Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, you'll hear interviews with innovative creative artists, entrepreneurs, business executives, and thought leaders. You'll have a front row seat as they explore their internal, uncharted waters about what inspires them to grow, achieve, and innovate. Get their insights and realizations as I tease out answers to questions they've never pondered before. You'll also learn how to supercharge your innovative drive, mindfulness, and communication skills so you can succeed. This episode is brought to you by my favorite productivity hack, the Brain FM app, this podcast's host, Podbean, as well as my book, Speak From Within, Engage, Inspire, and Motivate Any Audience. Hey there, and welcome to the Creative Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. Super excited that you're here. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And I am thrilled and honored to have back a guest that's been on the show before, Josh Kline. Let me tell you about Josh. Josh is an Emmy-winning technologist who's transforming media and entertainment. As co-founder of Sample Digital, he pioneered Digital Dailies, earning a Primetime Emmy Engineering Award. With executive roles at Box and Final Draft, and you know me, I love Final Draft, I use it all the time, Josh champions cloud-based solutions. Beyond tech, he founded HaveNeed and HOOZIN. Josh's impact extends to strategic consulting for industry giants like Microsoft and Scripto. A USC alum, he's at the forefront of innovation, which you know is close to my heart, shaping the future of content creation and distribution. And now he's taken on a brand new challenge of being the CEO of Scripto, a company that's redefining collaboration in screenwriting and script-based data via a native cloud platform. This is so exciting. Like TV experiences created by the likes of Stephen Colbert and Evelyn McGee Colbert, Scripto is aiming to revolutionize how scripting is done for live TV and movie experiences. Josh, thank you so much for being on the show again. Welcome.
Thank you, Isolde. It's great to be here. I always enjoy speaking with you. Hope you're well.
I am well, although as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I am covered in ants right now. Ants have invaded my office and I am waging the war, trying to be respectful, but at the same time trying to ask them not to crawl on me while I'm doing podcast interviews. So other than the ants, I'm doing terrifically well.
I'm sorry to hear it.
How about you? How are things going? How is being the CEO of Scripto?
It's great. So I'm very fresh to the role. I started consulting for the company at the end of last year, 2023. And I was handed the baton by the co-founding CEO, Rob Dubbin, passed the baton to me on April 1st, which is a funny day to start a new role because it sounds like a joke, but it's very real.
That's awesome. And actually, I read it. I read your notice on LinkedIn on April 1st, and I went, I am assuming this isn't an April Fool's joke. Let me reach out to Josh and see if he'll be back on the show because this is so exciting to me. As someone who's written screenplays and who's written scripts, I went, wow, you are perfect for the role. At the same time, Scripto is a little different than some of the other script writing and screenplay writing packages out there. I would love it if you talk a little bit about how you plan to sort of leverage your background working with Final Draft and other cloud-based solutions to further enhance Scripto and what it does.
Yeah, sure. So Scripto is highly optimized for a type of production which would be considered like live studio TV production. If you think about The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, where it was originated, or Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, or Weekend Update on SNL, or those are the types of shows that Scripto powers today. And It adheres to the same type of formatting structure for production as you're used to in Final Draft,
Hmm.
but was created to power these fast-paced multi-writer environments where things are happening so quickly and they're pumping out a show every day. And the existing tools just were insufficient. They were using the individual writers were using Final Draft and they were copying and pasting these text blocks into newsroom type systems to get them basically on air and into the teleprompters. And that just wasn't a very efficient process. And so the optimizations are all around one type of production, but the usefulness for a collaborative script writing or screenwriting platform cover all sorts of content creation categories. And so obviously narrative scripted film and television seems like a natural and we'll get there. And I think part of me coming in, part of their outreach to me and part of my interest in coming in to work at Scripto is my background in narrative scripted production. I've worked in development, I've worked in physical production, I've written, I understand that side of the business and the needs of the writer. I spent years at Final Draft as a chief strategy officer. And so this is an opportunity for me to a certain extent, it's unfinished business because I was at Final Draft to build out the collaborative cloud-based platform and develop a SaaS offering for the company. And instead, before I was able to launch anything, the former owners decided to sell the company.
Hmm.
And so I never got to finish that work because I then left and went to go work at Box. And so Final Draft remains a standalone desktop software application. It's the industry standard. It's a fully featured, mature piece of software. I don't have anything negative to say about Final Draft. It's a standard for a reason. But what it is not is a cloud-based collaborative writing platform that also captures all sorts of production data at the head end of a production and feeds that information to everybody downstream. And so we've got this opportunity at Scripto to stretch beyond where it started in this live studio TV space and start to build out functionality that makes it equally valuable for narrative scripted production. It's also, very valuable and useful for things like narrative video game writing. And pretty much anything you think about where there is collaborative, not just collaborative screenwriting, but multiple parties have to access the written word and the underlying data that comes with it. So corporate video, keynotes, podcasts, social media that's scripted. Anytime you've got multiple stakeholders like advertising agencies, creatives, brands, all contributing to a script for content. So there's all sorts of opportunities to build out. Obviously, we've got to stage out what we're going to do and when. We're still a small company, although we're growing. But I don't think it's a big surprise that there's going to be a focus on really building out this narrative scripted film and television space, given my particular background. And then also there's a category that I forgot to mention that is near and dear to your heart, which is live theater.
Ah, thank you for saying that. Yes, I was going to say this would be perfect for people, for example, someone writing a musical. So there's the book, there's the lyrics, and there's the music. And it can be one person writing all three at the same time. But there's also the opportunity for the lyricist and the librettist to work with the person writing the music and have it all come together. So talk to me a little bit about that. When in those truly collaborative environments, whether it's in theater or I imagine soap operas, even NASA scientists who are working as teams who need to build a narrative around a project would probably be able to use this. Can you talk to me a little bit about your vision for those kinds of collaborations real time?
Yeah, I think the most basic way to think about Scripto or any, and by the way, I'm going to make a note to come back and explain the origin of the name. If you're wondering if it sounds kitschy, it's kitschy. Uh, so the the easiest way to describe it is Final Draft meets Google Docs.
Hmm.
People that count on like the real strict formatting around dialogue and slugs and parentheticals and things like that in scripted content creation, they have to use Final Draft or something like Final Draft. But there's all these workflows that really depend on collaboration. And the modern way of thinking about collaboration, most people think about like Google Docs. It's incredibly useful, very collaborative. You can jump on there with teammates from all over the world. And what we saw over the pandemic, when these teams that were meeting in person all the time now were all remote, was people having to find the collaborative tools that worked in that environment. There were no longer writers' rooms. There were no longer in-person meetings where people could collaborate. So, what tools are there? And in the absence of actual useful tools that are the right tool for the job, people will find any tool that they can bend to their will. So Google Docs is a good example of something that teams use in the absence of a purpose-built solution.
Hmm.
And I'm interested to know also in your experience in writing, in particular the live theater bit, because honestly, that's a new category for me. Um, what is that workflow? What tools are you using? I mean, I know your experience in Final Draft, but when you need to collaborate, how do you collaborate?
Well, it's an excellent question. And a lot of times the notes actually end up in Google Docs. And then one person ends up with the responsibility of updating the final draft. And it's weird because with Final Draft and Final Draft Go, I can see my scripts, for example, on my iPhone, on my iPad, on my laptop, but sharing them with someone else, any other changes, they won't be live, they won't be real time. So any kind of collaboration that I'm doing is going to end up being sort of once removed. And that's one of the reasons I'm so interested in when you and I talked last week briefly, we were talking about this notion of how would it be for live theater? How would it be if you've got an entire team that's looking to create some sort of experience or a show or anything like that? How would that work? And so the next question I have for you actually is that what, and this is weird, but I just thought of this. What role could Scripto play in scripting live experiences like concerts or like one-off shows? Like I know they do that at in LA. I've seen we're going to do Into the Woods once and it's one time and they put it together and it's done. Is Scripto something that can be used when you are not necessarily writing the script, but when you are adding all of the different effects and things like that to something like a one night experience or a concert venue or anything like that?
Yeah, it could. It absolutely could because that's at the tail end of what we do. I will say that it's not, you're not capturing ultimately all of the value
Mm,
at that point because you're not capturing the collaborative writing part at the front end.
hmm.
And so, it's a really good question. The way the software is currently licensed, it always assumes that there's collaborative writing at the front end.
Hmm.
And then we essentially add on another licensable module, which is the production data on the back end. And production
Right.
data would be in live events, live studio TV. It's called a rundown. If
Hmm.
you can imagine the Late Show or any of those types of shows, a rundown sort of looks like a spreadsheet and it times out the show to the minute, sometimes to the second. and it says, this guest comes on here. Here's the dialogue here. Here's a story that gets told. Here's a graphic that's played over the host's shoulder. Think about like Weekend Update, all those graphics and people coming on and off during that segment. That's pretty, complicated logistics. That's all captured in the rundown. And for narrative, people familiar with narrative scripted writing in film and TV production, that would be known as a breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
So, what locations, what actors, what props, what vehicles, all that information. So when I talk about production data, it's everything that's fed from the script, has to carry additional data to essentially the department heads, so they know what they have to do as well. So the roundabout answer to your question is, could you use it? Could you just feed a script in? Could you import a script into Scripto and create a rundown for a live performance? Yes. And the super honest response here is, it's the first time I've thought about it being used that way. And super interesting, and something I'm making a note on right now to follow up with you on. Not
I love it.
I don't want to chew up an hour getting into it, but it's a great question.
It's, you can just hire me as a consultant. I'm here for you.
Yeah, no, I like
Um,
it. You're as we say, you're our man in Amsterdam
I
on
love it.
live theater, sort of one-off productions, live
It's
event.
it is interesting to me because as you are doing this, as we're talking about this, and I know you were at Final Draft, for example, you said yourself you were doing the build out, but you didn't get the, I'm going to use a crass vernacular and say you didn't get the money shot, right? You didn't get to see that part of it. So can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the strategies that you were going to bring to Final Draft that you are sort of intending to bring to Scripto? How does that flow for you as someone who was developing it at Final Draft, and now you get to work and build it out and present it to the public with Scripto?
Yeah. So uh, you can imagine it's an exciting opportunity for me. I communicated it early on when I was introduced to the founding CEO and then to the Colberts as well. I refer to a lot of this work as unfinished business, and I think
Mm,
they gravitated towards that. I spent a couple of years of my life building out a solution that had been communicated as being critically important to the creative community and critically important to the company that hired me to do it and then decided to sell itself instead. And I spent some time after the Final Draft owner, a previous owner, said he just wanted to sell. I actually was working with bankers to do a management buyout of the company because I really wanted to see the mission through. Ultimately, another team was successful in acquiring the company. So I just went off and did other things for a decade or so. And
mm,
when this one came around to me, it was such a unique opportunity because in the 10 years since I left Final Draft, no platform has evolved as a meaningful player in that space.
mm,
There are offerings out there, but they're not large. So this
right.
isn't a slight to any one of them. They're small companies,
Hmm.
and it's tough to compete in this space when even if you have greater functionality, you are in the shadow of a dominant player like Final Draft. So it's very difficult to compete. And there's inertia in an industry like the entertainment industry where everybody's comfortable with Final Draft. And so they create these workflows to bend to the restrictions, the collaborative restrictions of Final Draft because they're
Hmm.
comfortable using in the writing experience of Final Draft. Um, for me, the goal really once I was coming aboard, and I'm so enthusiastic about this mission. Honestly, I've done a couple of startups of my own. Obviously, or hopefully it's obvious when somebody does a startup, they better be enthusiastic about it because they're starting it up and they're incredibly difficult.
Hmm.
Um, and I've worked for a handful of other companies, and I've had great experiences on both sides of the equation. But I've never been as enthusiastic about joining somebody else's company as I have about starting my own until now. This is a unique experience for me at this point in my life, in that this opportunity to lead Scripto at this point gives me the same level of excitement as if I had started it myself. And I think part of that is there's already momentum there. It'd be hard to overstate the value of having a co-founder like Stephen Colbert. Um, Not just his name, but his enthusiasm for the platform. He's very involved, and he'll hear this, so I can't be too flowery in my praise. But in meeting him, uh, just go with it, Stephen. In meeting him, he was everything I'd hoped he would be. I'm a fan. I've been a fan of his work for a long time, and you never know how it's gonna be when you meet somebody that you've seen on screen for a long time. But Stephen's everything I'd hoped he would be. And then getting to meet his wife, Evie. She's lovely, very bright, and between the two of them, they're a formidable team. And I feel honored that they've entrusted me, as well as the founding CEO, Rob Dubbin. They've entrusted me to lead this company forward. So highly enthusiastic, unfinished business. Um, I've been in the space for a long time. So like, I'm not just a startup founder coming in, like I've got a better idea. I came out of USC and went into the mailroom at International Creative Management, ICM, which was at the time was one of the big three agencies. So started in the mailroom there. I've been in this space for 30 plus years at this point. I've worked in production and development. I've worked in the agency side. I'm surrounded by writers in my life. My wife is a music supervisor, works on a number of shows and features. So this feels like a unique opportunity at this point in my life to actually put all of my life experiences and my network and my relationships to work on a project that I'm enthusiastic about. And for that, I'm insanely happy. Love it.
I love that so much. I love when synthesis happens, when all of these different strands come together into this one moment of going, yeah, I've got this, I can do this, and having the ideas, having the obviously the knowledge base, which you already have, but being able to see where things are going and to not just respond but plan accordingly. And I would love to ask you that, like this industry that we're both in changes daily, and I'm wondering what is your vision? How do you envision Scripto evolving under your leadership to meet some of those changing needs and demands of the entertainment industry?
Yeah, excuse me, pardon me. There's two sides of that. And one is filling the gap for what's already needed, right? So that at this point, I don't even feel I need to be that innovative. I think the requirements are pretty straightforward. Um, I felt innovative 10 years ago when I was
Mm.
mapping. Actually, I didn't even feel that innovative 10 years ago. I already felt that these were gaps that had to be addressed. But for Final Draft to do it at that point would have been innovative for Final Draft. At this point, half of the task is marshaling the resources to effectively address the existing requirements of the creative community across all of these content creation categories and deliver a platform that provides those services effectively and in a user-friendly way. So that is, in my mind, a pretty straightforward task. Essentially, There's broad strokes that we need to address. There's nuance about how we address it. On the other side of the coin is once we've done that, once we have this platform that can connect all of the players that are involved in scripted media, starting at the head end of the process with the script or screenwriting component, what can we do then that brings additional value to the stakeholders throughout the content creation ecosystem? And there's an analogy here where in these ecosystems, everybody wants to be the hub. Nobody wants to be the spoke,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're out pitching money every investor deck. If the person pitching is always the hub, and then everybody's got to connect into the hub in some way that benefits the hub economically. Not totally sold on the hub and spoke version of this, where any one entity is the hub. I think about it more of an interconnected ecosystem. But I do know that the development and the writing phase is the front end to the whole workflow.
Mm-hmm.
And I've thought for a long time about the screenplay as being something of a database. That the screenplay is the database that everything else hangs off of
Mm-hmm.
and points back to. Because for scripted media, right? For true reality television, or podcasts where they're just, for instance, you and me talking, this would not be like a narrative scripted podcast, but for like a true crime podcast, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a narrative scripted piece of content. So for all of that type of content, the question becomes once Scripto is fleshed out to properly support all these different content creation categories, what's next? Where's the big innovation when the data, the screenplay data lives inside of Scripto? Scripto becomes a system of record for script and script-based data.
Mm-hmm.
So, AI plays a role here. And but that's not an answer. It's a tool.
Sure.
So this is sort of the great unknown for me. So I'm excited to think about those things. I honestly don't have the answer. I know I want to connect into all these different parts of the content creation ecosystem because I can provide script and script-based data to all the people that need it. But once those connections are in place, what other innovative services can Scripto provide? And so that's going to be an ongoing discussion. And I think that'll be the thing that keeps me excited and provides growth opportunities going forward. I mean, content creation is expensive and time consuming, and there are a lot of hands that are involved. And so, over my life in the production and entertainment industry, there's always been an effort to optimize how we do that. We used to cut film, and now we have nonlinear editing. So we used to have film dailies, and then tape, and then DVD, and then I created web-based online dailies. So there's always an opportunity to optimize, to drive costs out, to shorten the schedules for people because they're in real-time collaborative environments versus waiting for, delivery of some asset. So anyway, I think the future is bright. I think there's room for innovation here. I think a lot of this will come from discussions with partners across the ecosystem to understand the problems they're solving in their specific areas, that are driven by the scripts and the script-based data.
I think that's so fascinating because to me, as I'm listening to you, on some levels, I'm going, of course, I'm not the CEO. I'm not anything to Scripto except for I'm really excited about what you're doing. However, until you hire me to be a consultant. However,
Oh, I hear
when
you.
when when I think about this, I'm looking at sort of a holistic content creation process, right? This to me, I'm listening to you speak and I'm going, doing it all on the front end. What if there is that ability for the lighting designer and the sound designer being there as part of the process, right? So, for example, in a scripted podcast, we've got someone doing the Foley or the sound design. And if they knew when they needed to be present and accounted for as part of whatever episode is being created, it would make things a lot easier for them to prepare ahead of time, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm wondering, when you're looking at this sort of thing, there's a timeliness. You mentioned some that there are things that happen to the minute or even to the second. And oh, let me give you an example. Okay, so ta-da, I have a perfect example. So my husband was on the Tonight Show relatively recently, well, Halloween, and he's a juggler, and Jimmy was going to be juggling pumpkins. And what they did, of course, is Jimmy starts he sets up, and then they have Rich, because Rich kind of looks like him from the back. They had my husband come in and juggle the pumpkins, and then they cut back to Jimmy at the end. And that was split second. And I looked at that cut and I went, honestly, no offense to anybody, but they cut it a little bit the wrong time in order for it to look seamless. So my question to you
Yeah.
is, when someone is using Scripto for that kind of thing, is there going to be the ability to do some of that editing real time to make sure that those kinds of very quick cuts are able to happen in a way that does work? Again, no offense intended to the Tonight Show folks. They're putting in a full length show every night. Uh, how does that work with something like Scripto when there are so many, as you put it, stakeholders and interested parties?
Yeah, so that's an interesting, uh, there's so many interesting things about that story, including that your husband was juggling pumpkins on the Tonight Show. If you,
As one does.
yeah, as one does. I mean, it's a fascinating story. Um, so yeah, there's an idea within Scripto and the team about real-time notifications relating to things that impact events that impact people throughout the production process. And
Hmm.
that can be real time. For instance, we drive, we have the ability to drive the teleprompter from Scripto. So normally you'd write, for instance, in Final Draft or something else, Google Docs, anything, and then you'd copy that and you'd paste it into the teleprompter software. We can cut that middle stage out, and the reason that's important is writers can keep writing in real time while the
Hmm.
show's happening. So like an award show, something like that, where it's all happening in real time, and you want to make sure that the prompter is getting the most up-to-date information.
Sure.
So something like the description of, your husband, them having it cut to Jimmy, um, the there's a concept of script-based editing, and the teams at Avid and Adobe spend time thinking about this. Avid has something called Script Sync. Adobe has different ways of doing it, and we're looking at partnering in this ecosystem to be a part of that solution. Where if you're script-based editing and you're triggering off events, um, honestly have to think sort of longer about how that impacts the exact story you gave. I mean, you can put that information, there's not just the script that you're writing, but there's commenting throughout that. So there's a separate set of commenting information that could be specific to what you just said, which
Hmm.
is, hey, at this point, we're gonna cut, pay attention, right? You're talking to the control room. Hey, here's a note. Pay attention at this point to be specific about cutting right here, not before, not after. So yeah, you can
Right.
pass that data along. You can create these real-time updates for stakeholders. I to be really honest here, because I am at the very early stages of having taken the baton, and I'm at the drink from the fire hose phase
Mm,
of leading the company. I don't know that we can fire off those notifications today to the control room to say, like, seriously, pay attention to this, this highlighted note right here at this exact moment. But it's not an exotic ask. I'll put
mhm.
it that way. I have a note. I'll discuss it with the product team. I don't think that's an exotic ask to have, this highlighted information that's like critically important and time sensitive. I think it's a good product idea, and I will credit you with it.
Awesome. But it's interesting to me because I remember when I was beta testing products for the National Geographic Society and at NASA, I did some of that too. A lot of it was you break it and you tell them how you broke it, and then you give ideas on the ways that it can be fixed
Mhm.
or addressed, right? But here's the thing, with this being real time, what is the danger of too many cooks? If something like that is happening, like you said, oh, you want to make sure you have the latest in the teleprompter. Well, what if you think you have the latest, but somebody comes in and goes, no, no, this is the latest. No, wait, this is the latest. What is the possibility? And how does Scripto deal with those very sometimes potentially quick real time situations that need to be addressed?
Sure. So today, there's a different answer for today versus 3 months from now.
Sure.
The today answer is it's not optimized for sort of specific permissioning throughout a team.
Hmm.
It's optimized for the shows that pay us now. And the way those shows work now is there may be a team of 10 writers that are working furiously to get a show on the air every night.
Hmm.
And they're not having these collisions, at least to our understanding, and we're in
Hmm.
pretty close contact with them. Um, However, we are spending a lot of effort right now on fleshing out the go forward permissioning structure for the platform.
Hmm.
And that will, for instance, we don't treat permissioning the way sort of consumer facing cloud collaborative platforms do, like Google Docs or Office 365. Um, if you're in a script today, you're all in it. Doesn't mean everybody at a company is in every script. It just means if you're in a script, everybody's in it and they're all collaborating because they got to get this thing out tonight. You're not going to lock one person out and say, you don't get to noodle with this script.
Right.
Um, but that may work wonderfully well for um, the Daily Show team or Last Week Tonight's team. It may not work perfectly well for a sitcom's virtual writers room. It may not work perfectly well for um, the use case you just provided for Jimmy Fallon and the Tonight Show, where there may be something where you want to lock down to, okay, we've got it. And even like Weekend Update is a good one. We've got it. We've locked all the jokes. We've locked the segments. We're ready to go. And now maybe just the head writer at that point should be the only person, or that,
Hmm.
you may want to just say, hey, all right, from, at this point, everyone's locked out except for one person who we funnel ideas through because we can't afford to have a collision
Right.
of data while we're on camera. And then we send gibberish to the teleprompter. We can't
Right.
afford that. So, now that we've all agreed we've got a locked script for production, for live production, now any changes have to go through one person. I think that's a useful way to consider approaching it.
I love that because
We've turned this
those
podcast into a product development session.
sorry. I'm just so
That's
I'm
great.
so I'm so curious about this because in my mind, directing and writing for live theater, it's a different kettle of corn every night. But when you're talking about working with a control room, this is one of those things that once this is really fully streamlined and is usable by many, many different kinds of production teams to be able to put this on. I'm like, this is a game changer and big time. But I do want to ask you, how will sort of the control room team's role change as this gets brought online for more and more different shows or experiences?
I think the control room personnel are, as has been described to me, sometimes are operating like an octopus at a control panel, like arms flying everywhere, just trying to keep it all going because they're the glue that keeps the show running. They've got all these disconnected platforms that aren't optimized for collaboration. And so it's almost like an Olympic sport to keep these live shows
Mm,
going,
mm-hmm,
which frankly was the origin story for Scripto. Like they believed they could do better. It wasn't the existing tools weren't good enough. And in the, this started under the Colbert Report. And so the years since they originated Scripto, there has not been a new generation of tools other than Scripto that we're aware of that's brought more efficient collaboration to that environment.
mm-hmm,
So I don't think this isn't one of those stories about is AI going to kill the screenwriter or some job. Scripto is just going to make life easier and more efficient use of time than the existing tools that people have access to.
which to me is it's a sort of it rings my bell because I look at all of this stuff as, it's the name of the show, creative solutions. This is a solution for this very creative yet also very analytical quick process. But I do have to wonder, as the CEO, I'm sure I know you're just hitting the ground running. It's for you, it's just slightly over a month since you started. But I'm sure that you have some strategies internally to foster innovation, to foster collaboration within Scripto's team as you start this new chapter. Can you talk a little bit about what your methodology is going to be moving forward?
Yeah, so um, I got nothing. No, I'm kidding. I got uh, as as we get into a more regular cadence of me interacting with the team, both as a whole and individually, as we bring in new team members that have different backgrounds and skill sets, and we sort of synthesize that into the team as a whole. Um, we'll have more. First of all, there's going to be externally driven innovation because we're going to have more and greater interaction with the creative community than we do today. And that's
Mhm.
not to say we don't, we obviously were spun out of Stephen Colbert's show. So we have direct input to the creative community, but it's going to grow. We're going to have more people regularly communicating
Mhm.
with the writing and production community. So where Scripto is highly optimized for the live studio TV space, I don't come out of that space. I bring a whole different um, hack
Mhm.
relationships with me and
Mhm.
experiences. And I've always been highly collaborative. And so I'm always reaching out to my network and my community when I'm building tools to make sure that I'm building for their needs. So we're going to have more voices and more input, and that will help address. Part of this is, once again, addressing the gap versus innovating where people aren't thinking yet. In terms of how do we foster innovation, that's always a really good question in an organization. And I'm sure you deal with this as a consultant. I'm sure you've seen this when you've been inside of other organizations. It's hard to operationalize innovation as a structured exercise, right? I think it's more about fostering an environment that rewards innovative thinking. And so part of that is not having a strictly hierarchical environment where, all the good ideas come from the top down, which,
Mhm.
is silly, but it's omnipresent. Um, I think, and I've communicated this to the team, I think good ideas can come from anywhere. And by the way, I don't think I'm being exotic in saying this, but I think good ideas come from anywhere. As for my own style of leadership, um, I by the time I ask a question openly, I usually have an opinion and I want to hear other people's opinion
Mhm.
because sometimes I'm testing my own hypotheses. Sometimes I have no idea. I'm just asking for input to educate myself. But
Sure.
oftentimes I've got an opinion and I'm testing the validity of my hypothesis. And I have communicated to the team that although I may come to a conversation with a point of view and a hypothesis, I'm not dogmatic, and I am happy to be proven wrong by a better approach. And so I am, I'm fine to pivot if somebody's got a better way of doing it. So I think creating an environment where people feel that their contributions are appreciated and respected, regardless of their background and where they fit in the organization. I think that's pretty important, and that's what I try to do uh, among a team. And and as I build this team, some of the people I hope to bring in are people I've worked with before, but that's not the entirety of it. I'll look to, grow the team with people from all sorts of backgrounds. And I want people to feel like, they've got a stake in the outcome of this, that they're respected, and that they can be part of building something that's greater than what they've pitched as the thing they're joining.
Oh, I just love that. I always love it when people are looking to build something that is greater than the sum of its parts because there's a synergy there. Yes, I know it's an overused words, but there's also a sort of a magic there because the gestalt is something that is in many ways revolutionary in a way that you maybe didn't even envision. So I'm ridiculously excited to see what you do with Scripto and how you and the rest of your team really make it into something that is that is something that can grow with the entertainment industry and maybe not even just the entertainment industry. Personally, I'm looking at it going, there are lots of ways I can see this being used. So this is very exciting to me to see what you're doing and where it's going to go. Josh, I
Well, I think,
know. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was to say, I always enjoy speaking with you, and you've already had a number of great ideas, both in the past hour and in our previous conversations. So I'll look forward to staying in touch with you on this and seeing what we can do together on this, because your feedback's always well thought out and creative. So I appreciate it.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. I know you've got to go. I've got to go. We've got to go, but I have just a couple more questions if that's okay. And they're
Of
short.
course, of
Okay.
course.
So first of all, if somebody wants to know more about Scripto, do you have a website or some sort of a web presence that someone can go to learn more about Scripto and what it is?
Yes, the website is scripto.live.
Well, there you go. And I will put that in the show notes just so because people learn in different ways. So I want to be sure you, if you want to see it, you'll be able to see it either in the show notes or you heard it now, scripto.live. And then
Thank
two
you.
last oh, sure, of course, my pleasure. Two last questions. The first one is, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? And I don't mean your alarm.
Paying for my son's college tuition.
That's valid. I love it.
It's fair, right?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Um, Above and beyond like working because I have to work, uh, I like building things that solve problems.
Mm,
Everything I've ever built was either a solution to something that was a problem I was having or that I could see that many other people were having. I like fixing things. I like building
mm.
things.
I,
That's what gets me out of bed. I really enjoy it.
I love that. I was the kid who my mom would give me her tangled jewelry chains unless you wanted to keep
Yeah.
me occupied. And I would sit for hours and untangle them until they were all, back to being themselves. That kind of figuring out the puzzle thing has always delighted me. And my mother never had tangled chains. So I think it was a win-win.
A real sense of satisfaction, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a problem that has a tangible solution, which I always like. And before I ask you the last question, Josh, once again, thank you so much for joining me on the show. What a pleasure to talk with you every single time.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, and I always enjoy our conversations. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. It's lovely to get into the juice and the sizzle of creative endeavors like that are also at their heart going to be quite analytical. And the two being sort of married side by side is very, very interesting to me. All right, I'm down to my last question, and then I will let you go get on with the rest of your day. And you might remember this from last time, or you might not. It's a question that I ask every single person who comes on the show, and it's a silly question, but I find it can yield some profound answers. And the question is this: if you had an airplane, environmentally friendly, of course, that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
I love you, Anne and Cooper.
Oh, that's the sweetest thing I've ever heard. I love that. Wow, that's lovely. The whole world now knows you love your wife and your son. Terrific. Josh, once again, thank you so much for being on the show. I am grateful to you and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do with Scripto.
Thank you so much, Isolde.
This is Isolde Trachtenberg for the Creative Solutions Podcast. Thanking you once again for joining me and reminding you, as always, to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the show if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2024. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope.